a little bit north of Little Rock. So it was a fun little vacation. So what I have prepared here for my talk is actually just like 4 little vignettes, 4 little ideas that hopefully will get us talking about sort of vacations, breaks, routines, and the kinds of experiences and roles that we might have with that. I wanted to start with sort of a distinction or a history that Michael Walzer brought to my attention when I was reading some of his work. And that's the difference between sort of vacations and holidays. So holidays, right, is a word, right, it has that history going back to holy days. So these would be days that were holy days on the calendar when the community would get together. It wasn't that you left. It wasn't that you went somewhere else. You disrupted your routines, you stopped what you were doing, but it was so that everybody could get together for this sort of religious ceremony to talk about it, to engage, to come together. Vacations, on the other hand, right, are the leavings, they're the vacatings, they're the going out and getting away and hiding. So increasingly we sort of blur those two, and our holidays are also days of vacations, the days of getting away. We don't tend to make that distinction anymore. We're more private that way. So what I took here was definitely a vacation and not a holiday. That is, there was no coming together when we went up on this vacation. We didn't go see anybody else. We hardly saw any other human beings. And even when we did, it wasn't that much conversation with them. All right, so let's think a little bit about habits and routines and the things that do that. So my first vignette, of course, I've got a little name here, right? Habits of highly effective people. This is something that we have talked about a number of times and something I've advocated for. Just starting from the week before I left, I was thinking about the way that the habits and the routines make it able to get things done, right? You get out of bed at a certain time, the alarm goes off, I get up, I go in, I have my yoga routine and my exercise routine and all of these things that I do immediately before I can think about it, right? The idea is to get up and start doing it before I decide whether I want to do it. Because if you ask me whether I want to do it, I'm going to end up staying in bed. So it's helpful to me to have that routine to get started. When I think about the routine of being in the office and holding my office hours, even though not that many students come, it's good to be available. And, I coordinate my schedule with their schedule. We're able to get something done by working in a nice, steady routine. And so it guides the way that I feel. I mean, I think about, the way that lunch comes along when I'll feel hungry. It's very reliable. It's very predictable. When I'll feel done for the day and it's time to go home, it helps me do a lot in terms of coordinating, getting stuff done, pushing through, and taking breaks. So those routines can help us be effective. They can help us get up and get something done. And, you might as well get started on it. My second little vignette to think about, of course, is Kafka and becoming a cockroach, right? So Kafka tells the story of the worker, right? The businessman, the accountant, who, after all of his work and all of this, getting into his routines and his habits, slowly but surely stops being a man and becomes a cockroach. And the way that is kind of disruptive. That's certainly something that came to mind to me as we were wrapping things up to get going on the trip. The day before, the Friday before we were leaving, as I was running around finishing the tasks, I had a list of tasks to do, the things that needed to get packed, the things I need to finish for work. When we were going up on vacation, didn't know whether we would have internet. I mean, we might have the cell phone. We definitely didn't have any other internet. Didn't even have the cell phone a lot. So I thought, okay, I got to get all those things finished. I go back out into the parking lot. The car's tire is flat in the back. I don't know what happened. Something hit the backside of the tire. That went flat. So now I got to deal with that. And I'm just being ground down by all of the things I have to do. Every one of these things that are part of my routine that I'm executing. Think about the way that the weeks leading up to the vacation were feeling. And a lot of it was that sort of cockroach feel, right? I've got one disconnected task after another. I've got to check this box. I've got to submit that form. I've got to, teach this one class and then it's finished. I'm going to grade this next paper. So the tasks all sort of come apart. They're not synthesized together. And they're not necessarily anything that I want to do. In fact, you don't even ask yourself that question of whether or not this is something that I want to do or what I feel like doing or whether I believe. it's hard to believe in it when it's a bunch of disconnected individual tasks that you just have to get done. It makes you feel right like you're becoming a cockroach or something less than human, right? Something that's not that's a robot, right? That's carrying it out. And certainly our routines can do that to us too, right? We get ground down by them by doing the same thing every day, the same thing every time. It stops being something that we can believe in or that we can connect to, or even, I mean, I guess it makes us effective in a sense, like you're able to get stuff done, but boy, it doesn't feel good or engaging or lively. It doesn't feel sustainable to work in that way. You feel like a cockroach. All right. The next little thing that came to mind. So we drove up to, well, this one I'm going to call, I'm basing on Kundera, where I'm going to call this the lightness of being, right? So he wrote the novel, The Unbearable Lightness of Being. So I'm going to steal that phrase. So when we drove up to Arkansas, it was kind of fun because we were going up to a place we'd never been before. We'd rented a cabin. We'd never seen it. We just got it on Airbnb. It was a nice little place. It was remote. It has a view of Pinnacle Mountain. So we typed the address into Google, and we're just kind of following the directions as we go. And it's nice because you get off the highway, quite a ways off the highway, and some really like curvy and swervy roads as you're going down. There's trees all around the outside of it. And you start to lose some of the internet. So, but we downloaded the map, so we were all right, but we knew that we were sort of out of touch. It turns out this place that we rented was in a town called Little Italy, which we didn't realize that when we went. But there was a little museum, and it's got all the guys' names on it that are laid out of the different people who had migrated there. So it was just kind of another world that we get into. And we get in the place and we open it up and it's gorgeous, and we unpack and we put our stuff in and have dinner and go to bed without setting the alarm. We're just going to get up the next day whenever we get up. And so we did. And we got up and we had breakfast because we were hungry. So, well, what are we going to do? We hadn't decided, and we could see Mount Pinnacle out the window. So, well, let's go do that. Let's go to Mount Pinnacle. So we type the address in, and we drive our way over there. Park where they tell us to park, which is kind of a small place, and there's a sign about the path that says, "Okay, we'll go up this path. You'll get to the top." It says about 1.5 miles, but it thought that it would take you about an hour, which seemed a lot to me. So, and it says it's steep. Said, okay, well, it's steep. We can handle it. We'll go on and head up there. They weren't kidding that it was steep. This was like a rock slide. We got about halfway up and it stops being a path, and it's just like rocks that they've spray painted. So you're kind of, we ended up moving along more or less on all fours to climb up there. It wasn't exactly rock climbing at any point, but it was pretty close. And we're not leaving. I mean, we're not seeing any other people while we're up there. We're not leaving any traces. We don't know exactly how long it's taking us. I mean, we've got watches or something, we could figure it out, but it doesn't matter how long it's taking us or where we're going. We're a long way from any of our routines. When Kundera writes the lightness of being, what he means by that phrase, the lightness of being, is that every moment that passes is gone. It never comes back. So what he's doing is emphasizing a lack of repetition, a lack of pattern, a lack of repeating. And for him, that makes it unbearable because each moment is sort of weighted with this significance, and then it just vanishes. Then it's just gone. Not to be built on, not to be added to, not to be, kept and preserved or collected. It just slides away one after another, like being just keeps disappearing from us. And I was thinking about that while we were out there. I wasn't doing anything that was, advancing a career or solving a problem or engaging with any routines. I didn't know what time of day it was. I didn't know when I was supposed to be eating lunch. I really was hiking in a way that leaves no trace. I was really feeling relieved. I mean, really distanced from all the weight that those routines had been putting on me and all the heaviness that had been. It made for a really great first day of the vacation to feel that wonderful lightness of events that are just not going to happen again, of moments that just aren't going to come around again, of things that are not in any way routine. They were alive, they were new, they were interesting to pay attention to. So we did get up to the top of Mount Pinnacle, and we found out there's a much easier way to get there on the other side, which I'm glad we didn't know that first, because we probably would have taken it. It was nice to be able to sort of challenge ourselves completely unexpectedly up a much steeper hike than we needed to take. Entirely because we're working here without a plan and without a routine and without a direction. Okay, so for the second day, after we get back to the cabin, we decide what we're going to do on the second day. And Petit Jean State Park is not too far away, and we decide that's probably our best bet, our best place to go. And so I'm going to use that for the second way I think about these sort of routines and repetitions and all of this. This is Nietzsche. This is the eternal return, because Jennifer and I have been to Petit Jean a couple of times before. We stayed in a cabin there once. We've hiked it before. So they're trails that I wouldn't say we know well. I mean, it's been probably at least 5 years in between, but certainly trails that we know. So this was going to be a repetition of sorts. But it was kind of neat to see, because if you climb down into it, it wasn't that I could walk first on the trails that are going around this path or anything like that. You get around into this canyon that's there. And every so often you turn a corner and you just feel like I'd seen this before. This seemed kind of familiar. I couldn't pin it. I couldn't place it. But somehow I was in connection with that. And it had us thinking about, our younger selves that had been there, that had done this. There was no sign, there was no mark, there was nothing, that we had left there. We hadn't built anything. We were doing exactly what we did before. We were following exactly the same path. We were walking around the same way. It was new. It wasn't rote. We weren't, sort of mindlessly taking this move. We hadn't become cockroaches on this, but there definitely was a repetition. And that kind of made it a little bit deeper. It gave it a little bit more feeling, a little bit more weight than the previous one. And then if you're around Petit Jean, there's a bunch of ways that they've improved the hiking trail. So they've taken rocks and built steps. So they've cut out rocks and they've flattened them and they've laid them out to make steps everywhere that look really natural. They're really cool, but it's a ton of work to do that. They must have done, and it looks like it was done in the 1920s or 1930s. They built a few stone structures that you can go stand on to see the view. And so that got me thinking about all those people that had been there, right, to build this. Like, who came out here as the workers? What were they like? Where did they come from? How much time did they spend building each one of these steps that now I'm part of, right, that I'm connecting to? So it's not just repetition. For me, I'm also following in the paths, right, of these other people, of this kind of, it looked to me like sort of a New Deal, Great Society kind of project. And what their hopes and dreams must have been, what this meant to them to build it. All of that is sort of floating right around here. And in my repetition, my flowing through this again, I'm getting to sort of travel in time almost, right? Move back to it. Now, Petit Jean has a neat cave up on the, I think it's up on the north side that we went to. If you go into it in the back, there are some Native American drawings that are still up on the wall. Those have been there for thousands of years. I think they said that they had been there for 4,000 years. Roughly that they were thinking about, those had been there. Because it's a big cave and it's nice and dry, and you get in there, there's no water in the back. You can see smoke has gone up the side all the time. You can see some wood down there. Some people have held fires fairly recently. But because of those paintings, right, that there are thousands and thousands of years, right, when people were here, when they were walking in and out of this place, when they were doing exactly what we were doing, right? We were having all of that repetition flowing through there. In fact, you think about it, right? 4,000 years, as I started to try and date it. That means that, when Christopher Columbus landed in Haiti, there were people in this cave. They were living there. They didn't have a clue when the plague goes through Europe. There are people living there, right? They don't know Europe exists. They never heard of it. When Buddha becomes enlightened, right? And there are people in this cave. So those are all kind of like a lot of depth that came from the repetition, for me and Jennifer, just walking around the same plants, the same place. And so on the third day, we went up to the top of another mountain that was a little bit farther down, Lake Catherine, that we'd been to before as well. And walking on the top of this mountain, I'm noticing like there's even a deeper kind of repetition here, because you can see a lot of the same trees that we had seen before, and you can see little ones growing up next to them, and you can see the way that, since this is kind of a mountain, at the bottom you've got one sort of environment, and the top, the environment is a little bit thinner, the trees are more deciduous, it's not quite as wet, so you're seeing a little less greener. But think about how long this sort of wild space, how long this forest, these trees, these plants have been engaged in this repetition, just doing it again and again and again, and growing in that way. So there's a heaviness that repetition can give us, right? Without repetition, you get a certain sort of lightness. The moments flow, they disappear. There's a heaviness that can come with that repetition, that can give it a sort of meaning and weight, and consideration to keep doing it that way. So unfortunately, it was a short vacation, so it ended and we had to come back home before either of us were entirely ready. I'd really enjoyed not being connected to the internet in a serious way. I was able to check email about once a day, and that was it. And I thought that's kind of nice to have that. And so as I was coming back, I was thinking about flowing back into the things I needed to do. But at the same time, there were parts of it by the time that we got around to Monday where I was ready to get back to work. I had the books that I needed to read before class that needed to get started. And it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a chance to start thinking about this stuff again. In really sort of trivial ways. I have the pens that I use in my office. It's like, I haven't written anything with those pens in a week. I haven't picked them up, and that just doesn't happen. I have them every day, and I'm scribbling something out every single day. And I just kind of wanted to get back to it, to get back into that structure, to get back into what I was doing. So I tried to think about this. Like, the thing that I wanted to take away is, how do we do this? How do we use these structures to be more effective, to be more deliberate about what we do, without sort of becoming the cockroach, right? Without getting crushed by these kinds of routines. And really, I was thinking it comes down to constantly remembering while you're doing this routine that you don't have to do this, right? Choosing, as it were, every single day to do that routine. So sometimes when I use the routine to avoid my chance to make a choice, it feels like a win. But in a way, that might actually be worse, right? That might actually be a case of me starting to grind myself down, to just force myself into doing things, and then not to freely come back to my routines and say every day, like, I'm doing this, I'm doing what I did before, I'm doing the pattern that I've used before that was helpful, that was interesting. I'm connecting to, meaningful things that I've done for years, and other people, right? Reading Plato again. How many people have read Plato, right? How many times has this been done? That's only invigorating if I remember that I don't have to do it, right? If I remember that I could at any point just toss this out and let it go, and go do something else. It's only valuable to me if I keep sort of choosing it every day and not just doing it out of habit. So that's what I was thinking about anyway during my vacation. So I'm curious, I just see what other people think about how habits and repetition have influenced you.